Welcome, everyone, to the Advanced Sports Analytics Podcast. It's Tuesday, April 13th. I'm here with Stuart Gibson. Stuart and I are going to try to cover both NBA and MLB in a relatively short period of time. Stuart, how's it going?
Going all right. Hopefully looking to rebound after last night. Had a lot of Rashawn Holmes, decent bit of Harrison Barnes. Both guys got injured super early. Made a pivot off Beal when the minutes restriction or limit kind of news broke. Was talking over with Gus, and I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts as well on this. It would feel that there is potentially some advantage to, I don't know, I guess like either aggressively responding to news like minutes limits, or I guess really he was recommending kind of the counter that, you know, there could be some advantage to ignoring possible minutes limits concerns, the thinking being that, you know, you think it's more likely than not that the player's, you know, minute restriction is likely to be true. However, if the entire pool of players, contestants, or, you know, 90%, whatever percent is reacting appropriately from kind of a optimal standpoint and pivoting off of Beal, there does feel like there would be some advantage to be had by essentially taking the contrarian stance that minutes limit won't be, will be kind of noise or whatnot. And that, you know, more times than not, you are going to lose because I think probably more than half the time minutes limits are in fact accurate. However, in the, you know, say whatever it is, 30%, 20% of the time that minutes limit is erroneous or kind of misreported or is not, not held true, that you stand to benefit massively in kind of your ability to leapfrog all people that have responded to minutes limits news accordingly. Does that thought process make sense, or are you kind of the mind that you should just kind of respond to some of these news breaks in just kind of the optimal way?
Yeah, I think you should just get off the guys. I think you should sort of respond in the straightforward fashion. On SuperDraft, it's a little bit of a more nuanced conversation because you do have so few people in line, and maybe, say in this case, everyone goes off and onto Westbrook. Like, you can possibly be a bit contrarian, but I would say in general, you just sort of make the obvious news pivots. We, although historically very focused on distributions, our current versions of the apps, it's not apparent that we are super focused on distributions and upside. But I sort of like the simple way that Roto Grinders tries to quantify into a smash percentage. And it is useful, like when news comes out about minutes limits, they tend to lower the smash percentage close to zero. And I think that's basically what happens. Like, most of the time, the minutes restrictions are abided by, and they are just unlikely to have any upside. And as a player, you should just make that simple pivot away from those guys.
Okay. Yeah, it certainly seems sensible from kind of the optimal play standpoint. Like, obviously, if there's inherent risk that a player is going to have suppressed minutes, you know, assuming that the pricing that came out kind of in the morning isn't baking that into their price, which, like, you know, I was kind of thinking about, and, you know, that Brooklyn game last night got ruled out, but it does seem Durant pricing on SuperDraft is a little bit scaled towards this assumption that he, isn't going to be getting his full run, which I think in the short term will be correct. I am going to keep a close eye and kind of want to see how Durant's role expands, because, I do think there will be one or two nights there where kind of he gets close to his full run such that he is outperforming that, He was 1.15x last night. It's too bad that Brooklyn game is a 4 p.m. Start time, so won't have an opportunity to potentially exploit that today. But we'll see how much he plays today and kind of moving forward. I'll be interested to see kind of how his minutes and price respond to some of his recent performances.
So yeah, last night it was just sort of a bizarre night all around. I was sort of near the top of the leaderboard and then just filtered into a zero cash position, I think. But going into tonight, relatively fun slate tonight, short slate. Let's start at center position. Who are some of your targets at the center position?
Well, Andre Drummond is a guy that we have projected favorably, and I think makes sense. He's kind of settled into a pretty comfortable workload there in Los Angeles. We know about his per-minute productivity. He can rebound, he can score, he can block shots. And 1.6x is a lot for him. I mean, when there's a high multiplier for him, like when he was back with Detroit, Cleveland, yes, he was getting minutes north of 30. He's not really getting that right now with Los Angeles, but we saw his multiplier down, well below 1.5, in kind of the 1.2 to 1.3 range. So Drummond at 1.6, I think makes a lot of sense. Charlotte will be thin in the front court tonight with PJ Washington, who I don't really tab as like an exceptional defender or anything, but they will be short PJ Washington. So yeah, I think Drummond's a really strong guy to target at the center position. He's a true center as well. Gobert didn't really get it done last night, and his multiplier has come down. I think the underlying metrics for a guy like Gobert, I don't know, kind of like they make sense, but it seems like we're consistently kind of high on him, and he is kind of a high frequency letdown player. The multiplier has come down for him, and I believe Mike Conley is expected to play tonight. So, just one more chef in the kitchen, one more cook in the kitchen, lower multiplier. It does kind of feel like both of those things are working against Gobert as far as the play. We still have a reasonably strong projection on him, but I don't know, the kind of eye test would maybe suggest that he might be someone to stay away from at that low multiplier. Ayton, I think, could be in play, although, as you've mentioned before on the show, Miami has a very strong and efficient defense that I think could cost Ayton some efficiency. But he's, I think, good to get over 30 minutes, which at points this year has not been the case. But he has been kind of, for the most part, at or above 30 minutes as of late. Looks like in his last 5 games, he's gone over 30. 3 out of those 5 games been kind of right at 31. And then in a blowout victory, played only 25 minutes. So I think, in pretty good shape to get kind of 30, low 30s minutes. So I like Ayton a decent bit. Those would be kind of the true centers that stand out to me.
So Utah is a 17-point favorite. We like Basley a good bit at the forward position. Is there anyone else with Shea out, Roby out, or is there anyone else who you would play? Because the Utah guys are great values, and the idea of like 2 OKC guys with 3 Utah guys is a possibility. Who's your second OKC guy if you had to force it?
Kenrick Williams, I think, will get plenty of run as kind of a swingman, kind of a forward guard hybrid player. he should be close to 30 minutes and is at 1.8x. So I like kind of the pricing on Kenrick Williams. Dort looks like, it's odd that we don't have a better projection on Dort, even though I think we're pretty bullish on like his minutes and we have him at a high expected usage rate in the mid 20s. To me, that would, and 1.7x, that should translate to strong projections, but it just isn't there for Dort. So I don't know if there's maybe there's efficiency concerns that are kind of the underpinning of that. I wouldn't say it's a bad projection for Dort. It's just not super strong given, I think expectations of minutes and usage in the mid to high 20s at 1.7x should translate to a stronger projection. It's odd that we aren't a little bit higher on some of these OKC guys. I think also there's just significant blowout risk in this game. So, that might curb some of the minute ceiling for a guy like Dort or Maladon, even Baisley to a lesser extent. We've got a fairly strong projection on Tony Bradley, who, I think would be kind of the center that could get some mop-up time if the game blows out. I mean, Utah's a 17-point favorite, so it seems pretty likely that – and Utah is pretty aggressive in, like, stepping on the gas early and removing their guys late in the game. With Mitchell and Gobert in particular, they seem to be pretty sensitive to blowouts in terms of, removing players early. I think Bradley could be a guy to target in kind of a blowout scenario type game. Those would be kind of some of the OKC guys that stand out to me aside from Baisley.
So since our values are so high on Utah guys, similar to last night, what are going to be your rules for cash games and tournaments on Utah guys? For cash games, are you okay with 3 guys? Like right now, Donovan's highest for us. Bojan is next, and then Gobert is also high, although you sort of said you don't want to play him. Conley, if he goes, is relatively high for us. Ingles is relatively high. What's your plan in cash games? Just Donovan and Bojan?
Well, I don't know. I haven't been playing a ton of cash games lately, but I mean, I don't really consider like lineup rules for cash. I'm really just trying to optimize towards projected fantasy points. So I don't know that I would put any sort of limitation or kind of at least one type coercion. I don't know. I mean, I guess like maybe one rule I would put is max like 3. I'm not sure that I would want to play like 4 Utah players in the same cash lineup. Just does feel like, I don't know. On the one hand, like playing multiple players from the same team, in theory, maybe reduces volatility since there's kind of neutral to negative correlation between 2 players on the same team. I do think with this given game and given the blowout risk, like you are kind of putting a lot of chips on this game being modestly close and Utah not going to the bench, early in the case of a blowout. And certainly by stacking up, not stacking, but just rostering, 3+ guys from Utah, you do kind of open yourself up to a lot of risk where if Utah, gets up by 20 plus points early in the third quarter, I would say those Utah guys are in a way kind of, there's potential for correlation with one another in that if the game blows out, they are all kind of correlatively adversely affected, the starters at least, by that blowout scenario. I guess I might be hesitant to do like 4 Utah guys, but I think I'd be okay with 3.
Yeah, Royce O'Neal's a guy who I'd be confident would get there in a blowout, but he is not among our guys tonight. So in a tournament, what kind of rules do you need? It's sort of unique because it is a short slate, so it's kind of okay to have multiple guys from Utah, but would you go with a max 2? Would that be your play? And which two do you think do not naturally go together?
Yeah, so whenever Utah's on a slate, I almost always do max 1 of Mitchell and Gobert. Their multipliers really are consistently at the point where you need, like, Mitchell and Gobert. I kind of liken to like Trae Young and Capella, where obviously like Gobert and Capella can get there in ways that are somewhat independent of Mitchell through rebounding and shot blocking, but their multipliers are so low that, like, for Gobert to pay off for tournament purposes, you do need him to score some points. And that's the type of stuff. That's the type of kind of productivity that I think cannibalizes Mitchell's productivity. So I almost always, when Utah is playing, do a max 1 of Mitchell and Gobert. And then, yeah, on a short slate like this, usually my default is to cap teams at 2 unless there is, a massive amount of value that opens up. So, like, I've been playing on some of these slates, like allowing 3 Raptors when in these games where Lowry and Van Vliet are out, give myself flexibility to some combination of really any of those 3 starters, but never more. There have been times, I think, when OKC has been so thin, and guys like Pokashevsky and Brown and some others have been priced pretty low with high multipliers, rather, such that I'd be okay with 3. I do think, I don't know, and I know it's a short slate, so like as the slate shrinks, I'm typically more open to allowing more players. I don't know. I still just feel like I'd probably go max 2 with Utah. Like, it's not like the game is so it doesn't have a particularly high total. It doesn't have a low total. It's kind of slightly above average. But yeah, the prices on Mitchell, the pricing on Gobert, like both of these guys at 1.1 and 1.15, not both, but for either of them to succeed, they have to have like really, really productive games. For Conley to succeed at 1.45, he has to have a pretty productive game. And just take some combo of Conley plus either Mitchell or Gobert. For either of those kind of 2-player combos to succeed, they really have to soak up a good bit of the team's offensive usage, and I don't really know that leaves that much left over for guys like Ingles, guys like Bogdanovic. So the short slate like this, I think there is a case to be made for capping Utah players at 3. I probably will not do that as things sit now. I think there would be good value in Charlotte. I think Portland should have some Portland-Boston game should have some valuable plays. So I don't know. As of now, well, now that I think about it, four games is really not that much. So, figure if you take max 2 from any team, there are 8 teams playing. So, I don't know. I guess maybe now that I kind of think about just the sheer kind of size of the slate, I think maybe 3 Utah could make sense, but definitely wouldn't. I would want to avoid definitely the pairing of Mitchell and Gobert. An alternative way to do that, maybe you're okay with like Mitchell, Gobert plus Bogdanovic, but so you could do like max 1 of Mitchell, Gobert, or max 2 of Conley, Mitchell, Gobert, something like that. But I definitely, if I'm going to go 3 Utah guys, don't want it to be their 3 like highest raw projected players, which also are their 3 kind of lowest multiplier players. Does that make sense? I don't know. Do you have a lean 2 versus 3?
Yeah, I prefer 2 because that Portland-Boston game, such a fast-paced game, closely contested. We don't know who exactly is going to get there, but there are going to be players that really get there. So the tournament lineups are likely to have the right combinations in that Boston-Portland game, plus the right two Utah guys. I think that's the best way to go. At the forward spot, who jumps out at you?
Yeah, I mean, trying to take advantage of that thin Charlotte forward line with Hayward continuing to be out. Obviously, LaMelo Ball's out. So, Malik Monk continues to be out. Now PJ Washington's out. So, I mean, I think that just opens up a ton of opportunity for Bridges. He's kind of the guy that's standing out now. Really, since LaMelo has been injured, we've been quite high on the, I guess, secondary Charlotte players, which recently have been Hayward and Washington. So now that those guys are out, I mean, I think it's kind of just next man up with Bridges. I do think Jaden McDaniels could be a slightly deeper play, although we don't have a super favorable projection on him because I think they have pretty aggressive pricing on him. 1.65x. I would figure that his multiplier would be kind of closer to a guy like Kenrich Williams, but I think they have a pretty efficient price on McDaniels at 1.65x. So that's why he's not really popping into our kind of optimal mix right now. But I still think he could be in play. Baisley, you touched on, like that call going up against Utah. We touched on some of the Utah forward eligible players. I think Bam is always a strong play. The 1.15x multiplier feels pretty efficient, but he can have big nights, scoring, rebounding, defending. Yeah, figuring out the right Boston guy I think is going to be pivotal. We like Jaylen Brown. It appears to me is the preferred Boston forward between him and Tatum. So that's like another rule where I wouldn't want to play Tatum and Brown together. Definitely open to two Boston players, but might avoid the pairing of Brown and Tatum simply because their multiplier is so low. I think both of them project perfectly fine kind of on their own, but for tournament purposes, you want your guys to kind of exceed projection. And I think if any one of Tatum or Brown exceeds their projection, it naturally is going to increase the probability that the other fails to meet their projection. So, we prefer Brown a little bit at the forward position, but I think both Tatum and Brown make for fine plays. And, the multiplier is low and tough on them, but I think most of that projection for them just comes through in the high game total. That's the highest total on the slate as of now. By a pretty healthy margin since that Toronto-Atlanta game is not on the slate. So, like either of those Boston forwards.
And then who do you view as high upside forward? And do you view Basley as an essential piece tonight? Like, are you trying to have, like, we have 63% of Basley in our optimizers, plus he's a natural fit given that you're trying to avoid a Utah blowout in our positioning. Like, do you intend to have a lot of Basley?
Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine I will. As of I just use the ASA projections and apply some rules and whatnot, and it seems like as it stands right now, Baisley will fit into a good bit of our optimals. I don't see him as quite as essential as like a Miles Bridges. I kind of would place Baisley behind Bridges. I could see myself setting a rule like to have at least one of Brown or Tatum. So even though Baisley projects a little behind, Baisley projects ahead of those guys, I could see my lineups kind of upweighting exposure relative to projection on Brown Tatum if I go for a rule that has at least one of those two guys in Boston. But yeah, I mean, I would guess that it'll shake out where, and of course, Baisley has the multi-position eligibility. Yeah, I would guess he'll be one of my more rostered players at the forward position.
So in terms of super high multiple guys, how do you see Favors? Like, what are the scenarios that he does well? Like an early intense blowout, where he gets like 20 minutes of run, let's just say, or 15 to 20 minutes of run total. What do you see are his scenarios? And then LA has a complicated injury report tonight. They could just be thin and decide to sit some guys. And you've got Morris at a 1.85 multiplier. These are deep flyers. We're just sort of looking for tournament guys that could get there at the very high multipliers. And then you previously mentioned Kenrich Williams at 1.8. I don't see anyone else really at 1.8 or above that has any appeal. Although Royce O'Neal 1.8, again, just like he's a starter that also tends to get blowout minutes and sometimes has good blocks games. I don't know. What do you think of some of these high multiple tournament flyers?
Yeah, so Favors is not really a guy I would want to play. I mean, I'm just looking at his.
Yeah, I guess he could never really get there because even a good game would be 25 fantasy points, and then he's not a top 3 forward. Yeah, so he's Morris. I guess if you had it surprisingly thin in LA, he's someone who could get 30 to 35 raw at the 1.85. So he would be in play.
Yeah, Morris is a guy I would target over Favors. I mean, Favors hasn't played more than I think 23 minutes or so this season. His max minutes are 23 and a half minutes. So like it would just take some drastically kind of unpredictable outcome. Someone would have to get injured. The game would have to be a massive blowout. And even if that happens, like, it seems like best case scenario for Favors is 25 minutes. It would just have to be like the confluence of, unprecedented opportunity for him and also at least unprecedented as far as we've seen this year, like efficiency for him. So I don't really know that I see Favors having much pop. Morris.
Yeah, and the competition is so stiff because you do have some very high multiples on guys like Bojan and Bridges. Now, O'Neal, obviously a much worse play than Bojan or Bridges at 1.7. But in terms of a tournament, he might have some negative correlation with the really popular plays. Basically all the other Utah guys. Would you take a punt on him?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the stance on negative correlation. If O'Neal has a big game, it means that he is going to take, a couple 3-pointers away from Mitchell, or take some steals or blocks away from, say, like Gobert or Conley or something like that. God, I mean, his usage is just so, like, I mean, he's just a complete non-factor on offense. He hasn't had a usage rate higher than 20% all year. He's only topped a 15% usage rate 3 times. So again, kind of another guy, while the minute ceiling is there, he gets a ton of run. You're kind of just counting on him getting like a ton of steals and blocks, which I suppose isn't out of the question for him. But I don't know. I'm not so sure I'd be too high on O'Neal for kind of a different reason than Favors. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, my preference would be to go with like a guy like Bradley in that game. I think could benefit from a blowout and just has more more usage and kind of productivity baked in than O'Neill, but has more of a minutes floor and ceiling than Favors. So I think he would be my preference at kind of the 1.8 plus range.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was looking up the stat muse on Saric because I remember going to 3 games in a row when he was on Philly where he lit it up against Miami, but he's been on Phoenix for 3 Miami games and he has not done anything special. But he did have 3 in Philly. He had 3 games in a row versus Miami where his stat lines were 19 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 21 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and 20 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists against Miami. But that was on Philly. And tonight, it's not, I would say probably not one you'd want to gamble on. Okay, guard position. We have as our best play on Utah, Donovan Mitchell. So he's going to be a lock button in a lot of lineups. And then we always tend to be a bit high relative to the industry on Devin Booker. We have him in 75% of optimals. And we like Rozier a good bit. We have him in 54% of optimals.
I think Rozier has since been ruled doubtful. I thought I saw that he
just
ruled doubtful.
Okay.
So we'll have to update that after the show. But Rozier doubtful. I would expect Devontae Graham to slide up in a big way in our projections. Like we were high as is on Bridges, so I think we might even see a little bit of a boost for him. But I could see a boost for some of these Charlotte guards. Devontae Graham, I think, would be the most obvious, beneficiary. He's priced pretty aggressively at 1.45x. But I still think he'll be.
I was reading some stuff about just how brutal LA has been to play against for opposing teams. Like basically, again, the spread tonight is 206. It's low every night in these LA games. And they've been managing their way through these injury situations where their offense is like worst in the league. Not worst, but their offense has been very bad and their defense has been exceedingly good and they've been winning. So it's been a tough matchup, but I guess he'll be I would think that he would upgrade to not a lock play at 1.45, which is not the greatest multiple in the world, but a great play.
Yeah. Yeah, Caleb, he's not a guard, but or not listed as a guard on SuperDraft, although he's projecting to be the starting shooting guard for Charlotte. I think he would be an interesting play. I will be interested to see kind of how the math works out and if his projection boosts in a significant way because Charlotte is just going to be really, really thin at that kind of shooting guard, small forward position with no Rozier, who plays some shooting guard, no Hayward, no Monk. These are kind of small forward shooting guard type hybrid guys. I guess Hayward's more of kind of a small forward, power forward, but Charlotte's going to be real thin at that kind of wing position. So it is a tough matchup, but there's going to be some opportunity for some of these guys. We'll see.
And Lillard is not hitting any of our optimals at the 1 multiplier, but he has what you would think would be a very low volatility projection tonight. In tournaments, do you view him as a complete avoid. I would say he's not a complete avoid because there's a reasonable chance he puts up 60, and 60 has a very high probability of being top 3 tonight.
Yeah, I don't see him as a complete avoid. On a larger slate, if he was priced at kind of the multiplier floor, I probably would be off of him. But yeah, on a 4-game slate, I think playing the lone 1x guy, given his kind of high floor and that game total, I don't think is a total avoid. I might even be inclined. I do sometimes do some kind of cross team rules where I don't want lineups that have, say, more than one of Lillard, Butler, or Mitchell. Not so sure that kind of way of thinking applies quite as clearly tonight, given that there's only 4 games. I do think there are routes to 2 of those top 3 or kind of bottom 3 multipliers being a part of the optimal tournament lineup. So I don't see Lillard. I don't see any of these guys. Mitchell, Mitchell we've talked about as an outright strong play. Butler and Lillard, who were a little less high on, I still don't see as kind of an outright avoid. I think I'm going to agree with you there.
And guard overall is just quite weak. I think, there's a reasonable chance that an unusually low score like 55 would be a top 3 score tonight. So you can probably spread the ownership quite a bit at guard. Moving on to MLB tonight. Who are your favorite guys at pitcher?
Yes, we got a full slate. There are a lot of players available. John Means is the guy who's topping our projections at 1.85x. He has looked sharp early in the season, and I think even dating back to last year, some of the underlying peripheral numbers for Means have indicated that maybe there is some upside there. So I like Means a decent bit, going up against the Seattle team, which I think does have a fairly high cumulative kind of strikeout rate. Nola at 1.45. There are other very strong pitchers on the slate, Bieber, Flaherty, Strasburg, Bauer. Nola seems to be the one guy who is kind of not given the elite or near elite price point as some of these other guys. So I like Nola a lot. He regularly works deep into the games. I know he's got a tough matchup going up against the kind of potent Mets offense, but we're quite high on Nola. I think he's got good stuff from kind of a per inning efficiency, and then also can work deep into games, I think, with the best of them. So that would be kind of a mid to top tier or kind of low tier from a multiplier standpoint. Pitcher that I might target. Kind of the same things that I like about Nola could be said about Giolito. He at times has been kind of a fringe elite pitcher. He's also got a tough matchup going up against Cleveland, but he's also a guy that can work deep into games, has some good swing and miss stuff. So Giolito might be a guy to target as well.
I like it. Yeah, the Nola call is strong. The pitcher is the one guy that benefits from a doubleheader because usually they start pinch hitting their top batters pretty aggressively in the second game. And of course, he's the one player that just doesn't get tired and is not affected by the doubleheader. So it will be to Nola's advantage that the Mets are on a doubleheader. I think that's a strong play. Giolito, strong upside play. I like I like Means at the multiplier. Who is your cash game play? I know you haven't been playing a ton of cash games, but
At pitcher.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably just go Means Nola. I think there's a little more risk with a guy like Means, but I think that that 1.85 multiplier on him, if he has a strong game, like that could make him, that could make him kind of the winning cash play that you need to just lock yourself into the money, regardless of kind of what you do at at hitters. Like sometimes it's tough. You get a strong pitcher performance, or a reasonably well pitcher performance, but if you can't, your hitters go bust or whatever, and it's a popular pitcher, you aren't necessarily kind of locked into money. 1.85x with a strong game like Means could kind of lock you into the top half or so of cash games. So yeah, I think Means would be a good guy to target.
At the hitting positions, I think our projections have done quite well this year. We've tended to focus, as we've talked about several times, on what we consider high multiplier values, and it's tended to do quite well. And even with our projections, if you haven't stacked so aggressively, you've still done pretty well. It's been a bit random this year. We just haven't had teams stacks go off in the way that they usually have done. So you've been okay with not stacking. But who are some of your preferred hitters today?
Yeah, so Ty France has been a guy that we've been quite bullish on for really most of the start of the season. He's kind of locked into this solid, batting second in the lineup, so figures to get a bunch of at-bats. Some of the underlying StatCast metrics there are there for France. He's an above-average contact hitter. He makes above-average contact, so like his, WOBA. One of the variables that feeds into our model that I think is one of the more salient variables is launch angle and exit velocity implied WOBA, which is a metric that StatCast calculates that I think looks at the exit velo and launch angle of hit balls and identifies kind of the WOBA, which is a weighted on-base average. It kind of gives more weight to multi-base hits, doubles, triples, home runs, obviously. So yeah, he's kind of above average in his ability to make contact. He's also above average in the quality of contact that he makes. If we're using launch angle, exit velocity, kind of implied WOBA as a guiding metric. France isn't elite in either of those, but he is in the top third or so of hitters. And yeah, 1.75x. He's just got a good spot in the lineup. The lineup is reasonably productive. There's kind of a lot of swing and miss in the Seattle lineup, but there's also some productive hitters around him. Not really like name brand hitters, but Mitch Haniger, Evan White, we've been kind of high on, and Seager is a lot of swing and miss, like I said, but when he puts the ball in play, I think is good makes good contact with the ball when he does make contact. So yeah, we like France a lot. I think a strong cash play. We're not quite as high on the well, I guess we're actually pretty high on the Seattle stack as a whole. So I don't know. We'll see kind of how the lineup shakes out, but I think there's some other Seattle hitters that we could take in there. Alec Baum, we have projected as batting fourth. We'll see if that holds, but he, I think also is a good cash game play at 1.75x. I think as a high floor, some of these hitters, it's difficult to decipher whether they have strong projections through a high ceiling, but potentially low floor. Baum, I think, makes frequent contact with the baseball, makes above average quality contact when he does contact it. So batting fourth, expected to bat fourth, 1.75x. We like Baum a good bit. Cedric Mullins been batting leadoff for Baltimore and been quite productive. Doesn't have a ton of power, but can, has kind of like double power, can get those extra base hits. Baltimore's offense hasn't been a total dud so far this year. So batting leadoff in that lineup, while in the past has been not a super compelling trait, I think maybe it has a little more value this year than it has in the past. So Mullins would be a guy to target both in cash or as part of a Baltimore stack with, say like Mancini, Santander batting third. That would be, I think guys, to potentially target.
Now, would you agree that tonight sets up as a very good stack night just because we have so many ultra low run game environments and so many great pitchers on the mound tonight? It's likely that one of the viable stacks will go off and you probably need to have the complete stack. Would you say that it's probably a very good stack night?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm just realizing now I didn't catch that Seattle-Baltimore game is the second half of a doubleheader. Am I seeing that correctly?
Yes,
it is. Okay, so that actually then changes, I think, my outlook, and also I'm seeing now Means is projected as the starter
in the first one. Yeah,
got it. Okay, so well, scratch the thinking around Means, and also, I mean, I can't really say I want to play hitters that are only playing 7 innings, so disregard that. So I guess not go with Means as part of main slate cash. But yeah, in general, I think the more games, the more viable a stacking approach is. I didn't see how the MLB tournament that I was in last night panned out on SuperDraft, but when I went to sleep, the winner I think was they had like a 2-team, I think maybe Ohtani Fletcher stack, two player Ohtani Fletcher stack, and then 4 one-off players. I don't know if that lineup ended up holding, but on a short slate, like for an unstacked lineup to win a tournament, you need to hit all 6 of kind of those individual plays. And that being said, hitting 6 individual plays is far easier on SuperDraft compared to other formats that have, I believe, 8 hitters. Hitting 6 correct kind of roster spots is just mathematically easier than hitting 8 spots. So I do think unstacked or small kind of skinny stack lineups have a little more viability on SuperDraft. That being said, the last night's slate was a 6-game slate where it was kind of like choose the best 6 out of a reasonably condensed player pool. When you have a 12-game slate like tonight, choosing the best 6 out of a more expanded player pool, I think, becomes far less probable than we had last night. So with that in mind, when the likelihood of picking the best kind of one-off plays diminishes, I think there's more value in taking kind of a stack heavy approach. So I would think tonight would set up as a game with a little better kind of slate dynamics for stacking purposes, which I'm excited about it. We've actually in the past week worked to build out some of the stacking features for our optimizer, where not only can you specify what teams you want to attempt stacks from, but we added a new feature that allows you to limit the number of batting gaps that can exist within a lineup. So the idea being that a 3-player stack where you're stacking the leadoff hitter, the 4th hitter, and the 8th hitter, is just not a very logical stack. I mean, you just need very strange circumstances to happen for that stack to outperform a more condensed stack. So attempting to build stacks that maybe allow for only one batting gap between, say, 3 players, or maybe at most 2 batting gaps between 4 players, stuff like that, I think is pretty powerful. So, we just rolled that out in a recent version push yesterday, or maybe Sunday it was. So I'll be interested to kind of see and toy around with that and see how that performs tonight.
Yeah, I like it. With the 148, you lose some of the correlation, but you do gain in terms of the 5th at bat. So it is actually powerful in the sense that, obviously there is just some natural tendency for the 4 and the 8 to be correlated, the 8 and the 1 to be correlated, but additionally, it's very powerful to get the 5th at bat from the 8th person in the order. So it is logical in that sense.
Yeah, but like, okay, for the 1, 4, and 8 hitters to go off, someone in between must do something, right? Like, there's just there. For the 8 hitter to drive in, the 4 hitter, that means that someone in the 5, 6, or 7 slot, had to do something productive. I mean, I guess the multiplier component, maybe the 1, 4, and 8 hitters have far more advantageous multipliers than the guys in between them. But you know what I mean? Like, if you're stacking 1, 4, and 8, just taking, for example, even like take 4 and 8, I think that's kind of the most problematic match. Like, if you're stacking 4 and 8, it seems likely that some alternate combination of like 4 and 5, or 4 and 6, or 5 and 8, or 6 and 8, might be more correlative, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. So you have to think about, like, is it a max stack or not? But provided it is a max stack, having a gap, it is relatively bad, but it's not as bad as it would seem because of the 5th at bat phenomena. And yeah, I think on balance you want to keep it tight in the lineup, but it's not horrible. What I've observed is that 2 things that tend to be overlooked are that having the game environment where you get that 5th at bat, it is super valuable for the same reasons that we've said leadoff spots are even more valuable than people think because of the extra at bat, or in part because of the extra at bat. And then another, like, obvious thing that people tend to overlook is if you play, let's just say, New York tonight, New York at Toronto, and you're super high on New York, then you should shade up your projections for Toronto a little bit as well, because a sophisticated projection system assumes that, okay, it's about an even money game. So Toronto is about even money to have an at-bat at the bottom of the 9th. If New York does well, they definitely have the at-bat at the bottom of the 9th. And now that actually adds to the equity quite a bit of someone like Bichette or Guerrero, or even someone towards the bottom that now has a shot at getting the 5th at bat. It actually, I think so often people look at like projected fantasy points per dollar and they don't make adjustments logically based on their lineup, right? Like if you know for sure that you're strategizing for a game where New York goes off, then you're also saying that for sure Toronto gets their 9th inning at bats, and now you should be shading up the projections of all of the Toronto guys and be more inclined to play them. So it just goes to the idea that having an extra like 0.5 at bat expectation or whatever is super valuable.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're saying that because the Toronto is the home team, right? Like in
Correct.
Yeah, got it. So that doesn't necessarily work alternatively, right? Like if you're high on Toronto, it doesn't.
Correct.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, that's a good point. Paying attention to home and away is definitely relevant for these type of games because it can create an extra inning or take away an inning from the home team. So yeah, that's a good call out, and I think makes a lot of sense.
And so tonight, the stacks that have a lot of appeal for me are New York and Toronto, which is going to be played in a good environment in Florida. Let's see, I'm not familiar with exactly where they play in Florida, but they are playing in Florida, I believe.
Dunedin?
Yeah, so I've never seen that stadium, but it's thought to be a well above average game environment, and obviously we've got some cold weather elsewhere. It's going to be quite warm. It's as reflected in the total. It's thought to be a good game environment, and you've got great power on both sides, like amazing hitters on both sides. So I like either a New York stack or a Toronto stack, or a New York stack with a bit of Toronto guys in there. SuperDraft is a little less power heavy than other sites. You get 8 points for the home run, but it tends, because like a lot of home runs do come from the guys that are expected to hit home runs, like your Acunas of the world and so forth. You're getting like the low multiplier guys a lot of times hitting the home runs, and then you've got the high multiplier guys getting like 2 RBI doubles and stuff like that, and it on the whole kind of underweights home runs. But I do love both stacks, New York and Toronto. Tampa Bay has a nice mix of high multiplier guys that you can correlate. Like all the damage is coming from that top part of the lineup, and I really like all those first 5 guys in any combination. The bottom of their lineup, like Adames, Wendell, Marco, Zunino, all pretty weak. I mean, Zunino is he's too low probability of the homer. Like you're basically playing him for the occasional homer, and you should just never play him on SuperDraft, in my opinion. Atlanta is a very good stack tonight. Again, Atlanta just has a ton of pop in those first 5 spots, and it's so good to just play any combination of those first 5 spots. They're weak at the bottom, like Adrianza, Pash. They're no good, but Freeman disappointed last night. Go right back there. Acuna, Azuna. And then I think LA against Duffy is a good play. Ohtani hits well against lefties and righties. The Ohtani Trout like mini stack, you could go back there. Trout, best hitter in baseball, and he accounts for so much of the LA production. I think he's just a good one-off every night, even at the low multiplier. And then the Dodgers are a good, like high probability but low multiplier stack. And then Houston against Boyd is a great stack. Again, I would sort of concentrate on the top top 5 of the lineup in any, or top 6 of the lineup in any combination. Are there any stacks that I didn't mention that you like tonight?
No, I do think that was a pretty comprehensive list. I do like that LA. Ohtani and Trout are tough given their low multiplier, but I do kind of like some of these other high multiplier guys like Walsh or Upton who have pretty good multipliers on them. Fletcher expected to bat at leadoff, so I think there's some stuff you could do there with LA. We did have a question come in kind of related to that topic covered on Yankees versus Toronto. Question: since New York is favored, bump up Toronto on account that they, will I guess be more likely to bat in the bottom of the ninth, and I think that's correct. Yeah, you're thinking.
Well, I don't. It depends on the projection system. I would say, it depends. I would say that you should assume that is accounted for. So, in other words, the way that I do it personally is, you assume that the betting line is accounted for in the at bat probability, but then the next layer is what is the narrative that you are playing for, and just as if you're playing for a big Waller game, like you don't also play Josh Jacobs or whatever. Like your narrative is it's a pass game and Waller is going to catch the passes for touchdowns or whatever. If your narrative is that New York is going to have a big night, well, then you're just sort of saying that New York is going to win the game, and that as a result, Toronto is going to get the ninth inning at bats, and therefore Toronto is should get a shade up in their projections, all of their individual projections.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Do you agree with that? I mean, like for instance, with the Dodgers, Bauer pitching minus 335. They are not expected to get their ninth inning at bats, but that is accounted for in most projection models.
Yeah, and we, our model does take into consideration, game win odds, whether the team is batting home or away, and the batting slot of a player. Not so sure that there is a perfectly kind of linear function between those three inputs, but those would figure to be kind of the three core primary variables that would kind of feed into that small projection component that we're referring to. So yeah.
All and right. Then just to in terms of tournament strategy, we don't have enough data yet to see how ownership spreads around, but it should theoretically be more viable on SuperDraft than on other sites to figure out who the popular pitchers are and stack against those pitchers. It's on other sites, it's generally not advisable because the chalky pitchers are usually quite good pitchers and the hitters are justifiably sort of low equity hitters in those spots, and what you gain in game theory you lose in projection, and you just shouldn't do it. But on SuperDraft it's a different story because you are getting the high multipliers on the batters, and if you do have a guy on a given night who's like a 70% owned pitcher, it becomes super viable to fade that pitcher and play the hitters against him. Because now you're getting high multiplier hitters that probably aren't going to go off, but if they do, you buried 80% of the field. that's too good of an opportunity to pass up. So we need to get more data on ownership percentages and see what exactly it is that generates concentrated ownership on SuperDraft. But if you can figure that out, it can be very strategically valuable.
Yeah, my observation has been that a lot of the high ownership players, yeah, I mean, naturally there's kind of high ownership pitchers, and there are also high ownership hitters that are kind of like low multiplier popular one-offs. Like Cedric Mullins has had moments of high ownership, like Jordan Luplow, who's, when he's batted leadoff for Cleveland, has been particularly high ownership. Kevin Garlick, who sometimes bats towards the top of the order for Minnesota at kind of a 2x multiplier. These are kind of the guys that ownership gravitates towards. But yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. We had last night, I think Peralta and Glasnow were like the two most popular pitchers, or two of the more popular pitchers, and both went off for pretty good games. So yeah, will be something to pay attention to tonight. I would guess with the larger slate, we'll just see a little more diverse ownership at both hitter and pitcher slots.
All right, good stuff. Well, good pod. And tomorrow we'll do things a little differently. We'll sort of review what happened in light of our discussion, and do a little quick review of Tuesday's action before we jump into Wednesday's action.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be great.
All right, see you tomorrow. Thanks for the questions.